On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Nirmal Ranganathan. We're going to be talking about building trust in AI applications, and we're going to be talking about some of the adoption aspects, security aspects, responsibility. What are the guardrails that we need to see so that people can trust some of the AI solutions that we're putting out there? And we're going to hopefully cover a few other things with Nirmal if we have time. Nirmal, thanks for being on the show.
Amir, thanks for having me. And this is one of my passionate topics because we can build all great technology. If there's no adoption, then there's no use for it.
Absolutely. Let's start off maybe at a very high level, right? So adoption for technology projects have always been key. There's also historically a large part of technology projects fail. Right, I think there's some distinct stats. I'm not going to quote those numbers because I don't recall them off the top of my head, but there's a lot. I guess my question to you, when we're thinking about adoption and we're thinking about failure, is that potentially one of the issues of why we see projects fail? Is adoption just didn't work out?
Adoption, is probably one of the biggest. Most cases, projects fail for a wide variety of reasons. Very few projects you're able to pinpoint and say, hey, this is exactly the one reason it failed. But adoption is definitely a key aspect of it, especially in projects and technology where the goal is for everybody to start using the technology. If it's something on the back end, then yes, there's other reasons. But where we are today, from an AI perspective, the adoption is all about user productivity. So that is all on the users. And that's why adoption is key.
When we talk about technologies such as AI, it's new, right? I think, well, some could argue it's not new, but we're talking about to the enterprise, it's new and what they're starting to see and ask for. So we'll kind of clarify for that. But when you start looking at a solution like this where we don't have metrics over what's been successful, what's been failing yet, that's all kind of just, we're still early, and we start thinking about adoption and you start thinking about new technologies that are providing new capabilities. What are some of the, I guess, around adoption, what are some of the keys when it comes to something new to the market, right? Because we don't have those baselines and we need to focus on adoption. What drives adoption in that case?
I'd say first is trust, and you can tie security, responsible use, and all of those under the trust umbrella. People don't trust what's getting put in front of them, then you're not going to get adoption. So trust is very important. The second is change management, especially in an enterprise setting, where if you don't have the right processes and change management in place for users to benefit and adopt the technology, then that is a big hindrance. That is less so of in the consumer market, right? Because consumer market, the change management is really driven by individual behaviors. And obviously these days it's, you have anything on the social media, right? Anything that goes off, then there's trends and people follow trends. But enterprises, people don't follow trends, right? People to a large extent follow processes. The unique thing about where we are in the market today, and you entered on, AI has been around for a while, machine learning has been around for a while in enterprises, at least for the better part of the last decade and definitely this decade. But where the intersection comes into play is, given the peak in consumer interest on AI for all things like individual use, right, productivity use, that is helping sort of buffer or support enterprise adoption. But at the same time, if where you're implementing it within the enterprise is not benefiting the users from an enterprise setting perspective, then your adoption is going to not be there. So that is key. The third part is, every technology should work. And if a technology doesn't work, then people are not going to adopt. In AI as well, it's the same case. But whether it works or not, there's a lot of context here. The technology itself can work and you will get some input. Then it's about hallucinations, how relevant information is that you're getting, and are you able to accomplish the specific tasks that you're hoping to accomplish using AI? So there's a lot of different factors that come in. So to me, those are really the top three. And then there's, again, a whole bunch of other factors. But those are the biggest hindrances today. And one of the things you see in the market as well is pretty much every enterprise at this point has done some form of POC with GenAI. If an enterprise has not done it, then I mean they're way behind. So I'll say everybody's done some form of POC, but only a fraction, probably like 5%, maybe 10% has really taken those solutions to production.
So let's talk about that, right? So you mentioned trust as a key component. I think if anyone has been following just AI and Gen AI in the last 2 years, this is something that's come up. When we talk about hallucinations, we talked about trusting the results. We talked about human in the loop because we're still not 100% comfortable. When we look at those factors and we look at trying to roll out a solution, and I'm going to preface this where if you look at data projects, let's actually take a step back. If you look at data projects roll out and end users can look at the numbers and go, this fits with what I'm seeing, right? And they will either accept or reject, or they need to see some adjustments. Engineering, well, here are the requirements I need for functionality. They can see it. It's pretty binary. It's either there or it's close enough where they can work with it. But if it's off, obviously that's the other scenario. But with these solutions where we are actually asking the end customer, the end stakeholder within these projects to go, hey, listen, these answers are going to come out to you, but they're being extrapolated. They're pulling in data. They're looking at things that you necessarily just can't see and surfacing that kind of intelligence. You do need that trust. And when we kind of look at that and we have, some of what's been put out in media about issues around it, how much of a barrier, or how high is that barrier to overcome with what people have been hearing, just generally speaking, even just in their consumer lives?
It's a big barrier, right? It's a big barrier to overcome where, and again, you hinted on data projects, right? So the common pitfalls or the challenges on the adoption from a data perspective is one, on data quality. Am I getting the right data, right? I can have all the outputs, dashboards, or what the analytics and outputs are, but how do I innately trust that is the right numbers? And the other challenge is if, say, 5 people are looking at that and they're looking at it from different perspectives and different angles, or how they approach that information is different, and they're getting different results, that's a problem. So those are the challenges, right? So data quality, consistency on the data front. All of that applies for AI and more. So the same case, I need to ensure that there is quality data. Again, this ties back into hallucinations. For enterprises, it is very important that the information that you get is grounded in enterprise knowledge, because I'm using it in the enterprise context. On the, again, consumer or personal front, yes, we do want to ensure that we get correct information. There's a lot of, not this means negative information, but untrue information that's circulating in the interwebs, right? So that's a larger challenge. But I think from enterprise perspective, it's a much more controlled environment. And there, if you're not able to get the right information, then that definitely is a big no, or a big challenge from a trust perspective. Second is, and this is the larger challenge, I don't think there's a simple answer for this. Most of the responses from an AI system, again, just going back into a large language model response or a foundational model response, the responses are not deterministic. So a lot of organizations are trying to see how close to deterministic can we get there, right? So if I'm looking for a response to a particular set of information, if it has data points, then we want to ensure those data points are accurate across 10 users, right? Asking the same question in different flavors. The other piece is, if it is more sort of textual information, am I getting all the key points answered for all of them in the same manner? Yes, there's going to be language variances, and sort of that's the challenge with the current sort of AI or Gen AI systems. I don't think we'll overcome them easily, right? That's how those models are behave. That's how they're going to behave, and the outputs that they're going to get. And I think with the changes or updates in the models, it's getting better. We are seeing fewer hallucinations with more modern architectures. Again, incorporating agentic-based architectures, I'm able to, through reflection and iteration, improve my responses than, say, a straight up RAG architecture. So, evolving patterns and more capable models are moving us in the right direction. But I don't think we're there at a point where we're going to see sort of mass adoption production just yet. 25, maybe the year we start to get there, but I don't think we're going to see that in 25 in a large scale. We'll definitely see higher adoption than in 24, right, for very obvious reasons. But I think from this point on, it's going to be a more slow curve of adoption across the enterprises.
I guess when you mentioned, obviously we've been seeing POCs, people trying to establish core capabilities, and we're talking about small projects, right? We're talking about isolated projects. We're talking about specific low-hanging fruit. We're talking about maybe the best opportunity to go invest in an AI solution or an AI project or AI development. When you look at that, and you as a VP of AI are thinking about scaling these solutions, right? Extending it past its use case. Some of what you're talking about adoption obviously makes sense. That has to be successful. But when you start thinking about, guardrails, you start thinking about security, you start talking about those different aspects that we typically talk about in deploying an application, but within AI, it's even more unique. What are some of the technical challenges around that type of wider release, right? So obviously we want to see further solution. We want to see further adoption, but we need some of those, really traditional technical aspects to also work well. So what are some of those that you see?
You brought up guardrails. We can probably start there. That is probably one of the most key element, if I think from a security perspective, is ensuring that the right guardrails are there. And the right guardrail is really going to depend on the use case. If it's an internal use case, then I may not have as many guardrails, right? The guardrails might be as straightforward and simple as who has access to the source data, has access to the information through an AI conversational interface or through an application interface. So that's one, is guardrails at that layer. Where we see guardrails more applicable is when I'm building a solution that I'm exposed as a company. If I have a product or service that is exposing AI as part of my solution to an end consumer, end client, then guardrails is like your highest priority, because there you have very unpredictable use and you have less control over how people are going to ask the questions and who's going to get access. So there, I need to consider what we typically talk about, right? Transparency, toxicity, bias, all of those needs to be accounted for, right? Your complete end-to-end AI safety checks and guardrails need to be implemented there. Second is scalability. Is again, as your number of users come up, that is going to increase the volume and the requirements on the underlying systems, and that's typical of any system at scale. The challenge here is some of these services, again, if you're running a larger model that requires much more computing power than we'd want to pay for or expense for. So how do you balance that cost aspect of running these systems? These systems are not cheap. I mean, a POC is probably straightforward, but if I'm running for 100 users, it's probably okay. But looking at 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, or million users, it's a completely different story. So how do you ensure you can scale and be cost effective? Again, various strategies coming up, like design patterns where you can scale much more reliably. Today, it's more of a linear scale and cost, right? More number of users, more number of tokens, your cost is just going to be proportional to it. So again, caching and other patterns that could help with that are being accounted for. And then open-ended systems, that's also the challenge, right? If my input tokens can be controlled, then it does help. when I say open-ended systems, if people is able to attach content and then you're using that content, your cost is highly variable, and that becomes a larger challenge. Again, you can look at different strategies, but your typical strategies that you apply for anything cloud management, infrastructure management, cost management can be applied here, and then there's a few additional strategies. So that's one challenge. Outside of that, again, the previous things that we talked about, right, on adoption, right? So again, data quality matters, and the information in the response matters. And when you're exposing systems externally, then there's a lot of other things you have to consider. Compliance. Am I handling data classification, data security properly? And none of these are new. Anything you have to do with any application, you have to handle all of those. The way I think about all the challenges with AI, it basically compounds all of our existing challenges in releasing production grade systems, and then it compounds it like 5 times, 10 times. That's really it.
When we're thinking about a technology company building and incorporating within their stack generative AI capabilities, what changes? Because you mentioned enterprise, but I guess when it comes to an actual software company or tech company incorporating it, are there differences? Are they going to be the same as an enterprise trying to adopt some of these tools?
No, right? So that's why one thing I highlighted was the guardrails and the AI safety checks that you're going to have on the systems is going to be far more than you'd have on internal systems. The challenges that you have to encounter, right? Internal systems, sometimes, yes, those challenges do exist, well, right? As far as data classification, data access, and data rights, but less pronounced internally. You might have, say, 1% of your information that's like highly classified, right? Eyes only kind of information, and most other information within the enterprise is public within the enterprise, right? Everybody has access to it. And even if there's some blocks, it's more artificial kind of blocks rather than any mandated like data security, data compliance requirements. Whereas on the public front, as an ISV technology provider, when I'm building those solutions, I need to ensure that I maintain a bunch of things, right? One is data residency, again, depending on where, and then all the regulations that you have to meet. The second part is multi-tenant systems. How do I ensure that I don't have overlap in user information? And again, that introduces its own challenges, especially if you're starting to fine-tune models. How do I fine-tune that per user information, right? If I don't, how do I ensure there is no overlap in the information and knowledge across different users? So those, when I say different users, again, depending on the product, whether it's a single person or a company adopting it. But that's the larger challenges. And then with the open-ended systems, we have the challenge of unexpected behavior, right? Again, the non-deterministic nature for AI means that I can only test and evaluate the system so far. Majority of your tests and evaluation are actually happening real time in production. So how do you ensure that you have good observability and lifecycle management, whether that's LMOps, FMOps, MLOps, to quickly iterate, right? As you identify issues and even, again, from a security perspective, right? Security posture issues. How do you quickly resolve and get them back in production systems? No system's going to be 100% perfect. So it is important that you have good observability practices so you can quickly react.
I think those are all fantastic insights. And obviously within the space of building trust within AI applications, when it comes to, and obviously we've talked about change management, when it comes to actually the sitting side by side with somebody who is actually needs to alter the way they did work, whatever that is, who does that? Is that still something the tech does? Is it a champion? Who actually like sits next to the user to make sure that they're doing this thing correctly?
I think it's a combination of a bunch of different factors. I mean, there's obviously some aspect of like tech from an enablement perspective. So a lot of what's going to be needed are the right skills. Again, people talk about prompt engineering skills. So that is important. You need to kind of ask the right question to elicit the right response. And it's not just, a matter of asking the right questions, right? But how do you use the system effectively? I can have two users that are using a particular AI system, whether it's Copilot or other tool, and ask or trying to accomplish the same task, approach it from different points of view and ask questions differently and get completely different outcomes from that. So from tech perspective, what we can do is adoption-wise help from the prompt engineering, right? So basic training on how do I effectively use the systems. The larger challenge is a lot of people don't know the art of the possible. You're really leaning on the art of the possible here. And some of that just can't be taught, right? It's going to have to come through experience. The second part is, I think, really forming sort of peer groups where all my peers and my role, if we're going to, again, use the AI system for our day-to-day, learning from each other. That's the best way. Because everyone's experiences are going to be different here. And unless we collaborate and bring that knowledge together, it's really going to be much more harder to assimilate that and grow that. And then in certain areas, it's probably also going to come from your traditional form of learning, right? Where, again, I don't want to say classroom setting, but more things that you're taught. So there's a certain level of learning that you can bring in through that. But I think in the case of AI systems, I'd say 70% of the learning is going to be experiential learning.
I think one thing that's interesting to me with technology is early days of technology is a lot of heavy lifting with tech, and eventually as it matures we get a lot more tools and things become just easier. I am interested to see how obviously this will evolve in the next 2 to 5 years and maybe faster, because obviously we're seeing drastic results.
Faster.
Yeah, I think faster. Yep. Yeah, I think we'll be talking about a whole different bunch of things by the end of 25, and maybe we'll have to have you back on to talk to us a little bit more about some of those things. Nirmal, I appreciate your time. If somebody just want to reach out to you to pick your brain on something you talked about on the show, what is a good way to do that?
Two places. I mean, best is LinkedIn. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And then again, if you want to know more about AI use cases, you can head up fair.rackspace.com, where we've got a great wealth of information. And again, there's topics on adoption as well in there.
Awesome. We'll make sure to include that in the show notes. Again, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Amir.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. Be back again, different guests, different topic. Until then, two things. One, when we're talking about building trust in AI applications, I think this is really a critical thing. And Nirmal actually talked a lot about adoption, guardrails, who actually is handling some of these aspects, the partnership with the stakeholder and the users. Please share this episode with somebody else who might benefit. I think he did great and had some great examples and insights. So please share this episode. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Please follow the podcast if you enjoy what you've heard today. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.